curious people of Reddit who have gone through or are going through cancer. What was the first sign that made you go to the doctor? Story 1. I felt a pop in my back. It was actually a vertebra breaking. I had severe pain after and was later diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a blood cancer that was 5 years ago. And today, I am in remission. Story 2. My self-diagnosed IBS was actually a tumor and it hemorrhaged, stage 4 rectal cancer. I beat that, but it is in my liver now, too big to operate. I am living my best life while I can. Story 3. I had a persistent pain in the middle of my sternum. Doctors thought it was costochondritis, essentially just inflammation of joint. I stopped working out and lifting heavy things for 3 months, but it didn't go away. Eventually, I started having night sweats and random aches. After I fractured my hip, I got an MRI and biopsy, and they diagnosed me with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I got chemo, and I've been in remission for 5 years. I'm seeing a lot of people describing a similar chest pain and getting scared. Not all chest pain is cancer, and not all cancer is chest pain. I felt the pain in my chest because my tumor happened to be growing there. It could just as easily have grown somewhere else, and my story might have started with describing a persistent pain in the middle of my shin. If you're worried about something, talk to your doctor. Story 4. My dad went to the ER after a big bump had formed on his neck overnight. He was prescribed severe rash medication, but went back after nothing had worked. Everyone, even the doctors, thought it had been an allergic reaction or some kind of rash, but after testing for other causes, they found that he had Hodgkin's lymphoma and a 6-inch mass in his chest. It has been over a year. He has finished treatment, and the cancer shows no sign of returning. Thank you all so much for all the kind words and support. Story 5. My 33-year-old husband was diagnosed with inoperable glioblastoma, most aggressive brain cancer, in January 2019. When he was 31, what caused him to get a check was persistent headache that didn't go away with paracetamols and sleep. We discovered the tumors after taking an MRI. Needless to say, our lives were changed forever. Now we are at the end of our journey, and it's been a harrowing experience for me as his wife and caregiver. It's a lonely journey. I don't wish it upon anyone, and no one has any idea what glioblastoma is like unless they have gone through it. The median survival time is 14 to 18 months. We are on our 18th month now, and given days, weeks left. Every day is a gift, and I'm glad I get to be holding his hands every day, even if he's resting and sleeping most of the time, as long as he is not in pain, and that the morphine patches are working. That is fine by me. I can't handle him going through any more pain. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, giving me strength and support, and I'm so blessed to even be receiving all of your kindness. It's such a touchy subject, and I'm hurt all the time, but you guys being so kind really makes me cry happy tears. I'm so touched. I don't know how to describe it, but I feel a little bit lifted, and that's more than I can ask for from the internet. My husband, Victor, would have been so grateful to know that he is loved and supported by more people than he thought he was. Thank you. August 2nd. Victor has passed away yesterday on August 1st, 7:43 p.m. Swedish time. He was surrounded by his brother and me and smiled a lot to the very end. At his final resting position, his face looked relaxed, and a little smile could be seen by us too. I'm still in shock, processing what has happened to us. It'll take the time I need to process this and grieve. I just miss my husband. I miss his laughs. I miss his smile. I feel loved. I know I'm loved, so that's keeping me together. Thank you so much for your kind support, even though we are strangers on the internet. I am both saddened and moved by the generosity of others to offer support, love, and to bear their personal pain related to G-beam cancer loss in general. Thank you. May Victor find peace. I know he's not in pain now. Story 6. Seizures. I got seizures out of nowhere during the night. No history of seizures in my family. Got my head screened, and they found what they thought to be a benign tumor, anaplastic astrocytoma, diagnosed 2 months before my 22nd birthday, nearing the 5-year mark, though, with no evidence of it returning. Story 7. I was 17, getting ready for spring break back in 2010, was making plans with my boyfriend on the phone because we were going to take his brothers to the zoo in a different city. Literally in seconds, there's this big translucent blind spot in my eye that is orange. I can see dark shapes behind it, but it's super blurry. I figured I would just go to the eye doctor before I left the next day, but my sister, who actually works for the cancer center in my city, told me that I should go to the hospital because anything weird with your vision can be super serious. After 36 hours of emergency waits, driving to specialists, they finally admitted me to the eye ward for a bacterial infection. Then they took my blood for a routine blood test. Within an hour or so, as I was getting ready to sleep, a doctor and nurse come in. The nurse has a box of tissues. The doctor told me my blood is leukemic, to which I asked, okay, can I treat that? He was extremely unclear on what was happening. I was 17, my family had already left, and I had no idea about any cancers I was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia and started chemo that night after being transferred to a different hospital. They did a bone marrow biopsy the next morning and then sent it to a genetic lab in another province. When the test results came back, they changed my diagnosis to chronic myelogenous leukemia in the blast phase crisis final stage that was caused by the Philadelphia chromosome, where chromosomes 9 and 22 switch places and causes a mutation in my red blood cells. Told me I was the youngest person in the world with it, as CML usually takes a very long time to progress, and the final stage doesn't show until around 65 years of age. That change in diagnosis changed my timeline. They had originally said 6 months to a year untreated, but now it was 1 to 3 months if I didn't get a stem cell transplant or bone marrow transplant. All this because I had blood clot happening all over my body because of the abnormalities of my red blood cell shapes, and the one in my eye presented itself in my vision since the vessels are so small. Edit, I guess I never finished off. I just celebrated 10 years in remission on June 17th this year, and am healthy. My sister ended up being a 1010 DNA marker match, and I was able to get a stem cell transplant on June 17th, 2010, still immunocompromised and taking dasatinib everyday chemo pill, but able to live my life. COVID has been really worrisome for me, but I'm just trying to be as careful as possible. Thanks for all the comments, and P.S. I'm a female. The boyfriend was extremely supportive for a teenager, and we were together for 7 years before we parted ways mutually. Story 8 last year, March 2019, I'm male, 35, woke up in the morning to go to the toilet. I was urinating pure, thick blood with little lumps in it. So after a severe panic attack, it began to hurt like I was throwing up from the pain. After a day in the hospital and some scans and tests later, they told me to call my parents. So you know you're getting some bad news. It turns out it was kidney cancer. They removed my right kidney. Fortunately, no other treatments were needed, and I'm living the best life right now. If the tumor in my kidney didn't start to bleed, I would have found out much, much later. Probably too late. Story 9, my brother was 11 when he started experiencing symptoms. He started losing a lot of weight, and when he was playing soccer, it looked like he was running through mud and couldn't keep up with everyone else. My parents took him to the pediatrician, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. One day, he woke up and couldn't stop throwing up. When he tried to run to the bathroom, he kept running into the door frame and couldn't walk straight. He said the lights were giving him a headache. We took him to the emergency room, and they found that he had a brain tumor and had emergency brain surgery the next day. We were extremely lucky that they decided to do a CAT scan at the ER. Apparently, they don't usually do them on kids. 2 brain surgeries and a year and a half of chemo later, and he is in remission now. Story 10, I was about 12, and I noticed a gray spot in my left eye. So I went to the eye doctor. It turned out to be retinoblastoma. And fast forward about 1 week, I had my eye removed and started chemo, and now have a glass eye that has to get redone every 2 years until I was 16. Story 11, on Christmas Eve, 2018. My dad lost the ability to talk except for the phrase, "This is crazy," called paramedics because we thought Head had a stroke, got him to the hospital where the imaging showed a brain tumor on the outside edge of his brain. The swelling caused him to have a seizure. He was transferred to a bigger local hospital. They did full body scans because it's pretty rare to just have brain cancer. Usually it is secondary for another cancer site. We got lucky in that it was the sole spot. Went through a craniotomy and 5 rounds of high-dose inpatient chemo. And he's 1 year in remission. Thanks for the awards. Story 12, super heavy periods that would last for 10 or more days. Got an IUD to help control bleeding. Actually hemorrhaged so bad the IUD came out. Endometrial cancer. Huge tumor in my uterus. Ladies, it's not normal to need a tampon and pad at the same time. It's not normal to need to change them every 10 minutes or even every hour. An average period is 2 to 3 tablespoons. Just for reference, sorry if TMI, edited to add thank you for the well wishes. I am 1 year in ED, no evidence of disease. I was diagnosed at 40. I wish I could respond to everyone. The main takeaway is if something is not right, keep looking for answers and the right physician. Heavy periods do not usually mean cancer in premenopausal women, but there is no reason to suffer through them. Postmenopausal women should not experience any bleeding, 1 drop, and you should go to the doctor right away. Story 13, funnily enough, it was a totally unrelated lump. Nope, that lump is fine, just a lipoma. However, we found another lump in the corner of your x-ray, and we need to biopsy it. Story 14, I had childhood leukemia. When I was about 10, both of my knees started to hurt progressively more and more to the point where I was limping around. I also couldn't catch my breath. I remember this one lunch lady at school giving me for being slow walking up some stairs, and I just didn't know what to tell her because I couldn't go any faster. I went to the doctor once, and they said I sprained my knees. I played soccer, so it wasn't impossible, but they never got better, so I went back and they decided to take some blood tests just in case. Thankfully they did, because it turns out my red blood cells were 13 what they were supposed to be, hence why I couldn't heal and I couldn't get enough oxygen. That was 20 years ago now, and I got lucky. It didn't relapse. I had friends who did and didn't make it. It kind of a personal story that I don't talk about much. A lot of people have seen this and shared some great, oddly similar stories. Hope everyone is taking care of themselves. But to answer a recurring question, I never did see that lunch lady again. She was gone, unrelated reasons, by the time I went back to school. Another edit, I also don't blame my pediatrician for not catching it sooner. And I did end up having an incredible medical team providing treatment for me every step of the way. Story 15, I was diagnosed at 43. For 2 years, my gynecologist insisted that I get a mammogram as part of turning 40. I am very small-chested, so I thought it was a complete waste of time. In February 2013, I promised my doctor that I would get a mammogram before my next annual appointment. I was diagnosed in February 2014, stage 2 breast cancer. There is absolutely no signs or indication, no family history. All the way up to the pathology results from the biopsy, I thought it was all a complete waste of time and money. The results came back positive. Story 16, my dad thought he had the flu, went urgent care. By the end of the weekend, he had started chemotherapy. He had acute myeloid leukemia. Made it 6 years, though, so not bad. Story 17, my Nana. She had very loose bowel movements, which had caused her to get dehydrated. Her levels for electrolytes were way out of normal range. She later found out that she had a cancerous mass on her ovaries. They caught it in time, and she went through surgery and chemotherapy. Everything is fine now. Story 18, my dad was acting strange. He looked disheveled somewhat and was telling the same stories. Well, he's 86. That can come with age. But he was also swerving on the road driving. And he called me one day to take him to his doctor. Long story short, stage 4 GBM brain cancer. Had surgery, was okay for a couple of months, but was gone a couple months after that. Good part was, had no pain and didn't suffer. Edit, thank you. Story 19, testicular cancer survivor here. I had a dull pain one day in my right testicle. Didn't think much of it. I then took a shower and my ball felt different. It wasn't smooth. I just felt that something was different. I went to my doctor and asked him to check them to make sure things were normal. He did the check and didn't think things fell off, but ordered an ultrasound anyway. I went and did the ultrasound. I didn't hear what they found. They just asked me to go back for another ultrasound. The next day, I got told I had to go to the hospital to see the urologist. Within minutes of meeting the doctor, he told me I had testicular cancer and was having surgery that night. It happened so fast. I caught mine early. Now, I tell everyone to feel you and know you're normal. Story 20, I was fooling around in a mall as a kid. So my dad grabbed me by the neck to make me behave. He felt a lump on my neck and immediately began to get nervous. We went to the doctor the next day, caught the cancer before it spread, and was able to surgically remove it about a month later. Got super lucky. Story 21, my sister noticed a small painful lump in her breast shortly after having her second child. Doctor diagnosed a blocked mammary gland. A couple weeks later, it still wasn't gone. Again, doc said blocked gland. Months later, it's still not gone, and she insists on getting a second opinion. Stage 3 breast cancer. Double mastectomy immediately followed by months of agonizing radiation and chemo, only to find out it's now stage 4. She's been stable for a few years, but now it's spreading again, and we don't know how long we have her. Trying to be as positive as possible. Story 22, unbearable stomach pain in the middle of the night at 24 hours later, a 15 centimeters cyst was found in my right ovary 6 weeks later. I was told it was ovarian cancer 20 days later. I had a complete hysterectomy, M34. In menopause, cured and very lucky. Thank you, NHS. Story 23, I feel I must answer this question. I had signs of cancer for about a year before it was discovered, but my signs were not obvious. I had a backache that responded to massive doses of ibuprofen, so it went on for a while. I had been to the doctor on numerous occasions and was treated as a sort of neurotic, middle-aged lady with aches and pains. I was treated for fibromyalgia meds, made me nutty, told to get massages, given cortisone shots in the knotty muscles on my back, etc. My husband finally accompanied me and demanded they do some blood work because he could tell this wasn't normal aches and pains. Very telling blood work was done, but ignored, probably because the doc saw no emergency. I was finally referred to another doc who did more blood work, then left town. I was begging for results to no avail. I became weaker and could not go to work. I became feverish and was at last crawling back and forth to the bathroom to get in a tub of cold water. Finally, my husband said, "We're going to the emergency room." When I finally got in to see the doctors in the ER, they looked me up and down and asked questions. I meekly offered that there had been some recent blood work done, if that would help. They looked it up, and immediately I was put into a room and given I'm not sure how many units of blood. I was nearly bloodless. After a week of extensive testing, bone marrow test, MRI, and continual blood monitoring, a mass showed up on a CT scan. I had a softball-sized tumor growing behind my esophagus, and it was bleeding into my stomach and being digested as a rare steak would be. That's why I never saw blood in my stool. The doc, who never paid attention to my blood work in the first place, came in and prescribed me huge bottles of Vicodin. Needless to say, I never asked for her services again. I had a huge surgery, removing my stomach, much of my esophagus, my spleen, and adrenal gland, and part of my pancreas. The surgeon wanted to go higher up on my esophagus, but if he did, I would never be able to swallow and would have to have a feeding tube. But that didn't matter because they only gave me a couple of months to live. My husband said no to this and asked the surgeon, why not take our chances with chemo and see if that works? Thank God they did, because 8 years later, here I am. I didn't die. And I can eat almost anything. There is much more to this story, but I am here to say that the cancer symptoms were not at all obvious. I had never had heartburn or reflux, never smoked, but yet the tumor was in my esophagus. It had wrapped its tentacles around my spine. And that is what was causing the tremendous back pain all those months. Massages and cortisone shots did not quite cut it as cures for a large cancerous tumor. The pain after surgery was immense, but I never had that awful back pain again. I would say having somewhat regular blood work is probably the best way to find out if there is an unusual imbalance. That is what finally exposed my cancer. I would add, since seeing a somewhat disbelieving comment on my answer, that yes, it is entirely possible to digest food without a stomach, and although I do believe smoking can cause cancer in some cases, I in no way intended to bash any smokers, but simply mention this because esophageal cancer is often linked to smoking. Thank you for all the comments. I hope this has encouraged someone. I know when I was told I only had a short time to live, hearing stories of survival greatly encouraged me. Story 24, trigger warning, and blood. Cervix cancer. A couple of times during blood would just randomly pour out of me. Nowhere near my time of month and no pain. Turns out that is one of the warning signs. 3 surgeries later, I have had my cervix, the mouth, the uterus, removed completely, bit by bit. They tried taking only what they had to, as lack of a cervix makes impregnation and carrying to term harder, but it kept reappearing. I hope it's done now. Edit. A lot of women and other concerned people have been asking me stuff, so here are the most common questions answered. Keep in mind that English is not my first language and that I'm not a medically trained person. It was during he pulled out and it followed. It looked like a quarter of a cup. It was enough to literally pour out of me, and it pooled on the sheets. Light spotting or a few drops of blood during is probably just due to chafing of the fragile tissue in the vagina. No biggie. A lot of blood like this, or even just enough to coat your partner's member, is cause for worry. Do check your schedule, though. He may just have kick-started your period. It was not my period. It was nowhere near that time of the month. And in any case, never bleed that much or all at once. The blood was also fresh with no clots, like a nosebleed. If at any point, during or outside of, blood starts randomly pouring out of any orifice, not just the vagina, get it looked at, even if it stops on its own, it is not a normal reaction. Comments on knife play, not appreciated. I was 26 years old when this happened, and it was relatively short time after having a scheduled pap smear, maybe 6 months. I had previously been treated for genital warts, thanks a bunch, Kenneth, and have a low resistance to any wart-related vira, including the HPV virus, which can trigger cell anomalies in the cervix. I have since gotten the HPV vaccine, since even if I've already had this, it will strengthen the immune system. Apart from dizziness and a slight fever, I had no side effect from the vaccine, and I really recommend getting it. Man, woman, all benefits. You can carry and infect women with HPV as a male, and for the love of gods, get your kids vaccinated. The procedure is called a LEP loop electrosurgical excision procedure. These are done when you have localized cancer cells on the cervix, and just removes the area with the abnormal cells. When the cancer is a higher stage, a hysterectomy, removal of the uterus, and/or chemotherapy with radiation are the usual courses of treatment. Side after effects of LEP were very slight. I was sore and not allowed to swim, do heavy lifting or half or 4 weeks. That was it. You can still get pregnant without a cervix. It is just harder because it isn't there to funnel in you also have a greater risk of not carrying to term, but there are procedures to help with that. If you want more info on this type of cancer, go to Josh Trust Cat Found My Cancer and bug me about it. Until I went to the doctor, my cat has always liked to lay on me and knead part of my body with her paws. For 7 years, it was random, various parts of my body. Then for about 6 months, she started to focus on one spot on my chest. At first, I chalked it up to her wanting to be closer to my face, but after a couple months, I noticed that the spot she was focused on had become very tender. Then I felt a small lump in that spot. Due to my relatively young age, It took me a couple of months to convince one of my doctors that it was a potential issue, but eventually I got tested and had a pretty giant tumor in that spot plus other tumors elsewhere. Yes, Kitty got lots of cuddles, wet food, and greenies as a thank you. Story 25. Well, I have a benign brain tumor, which was diagnosed due to double vision and really bad headaches. I also have had a mild hand tremor for ages. I had radiotherapy 11 years ago, and now I have been diagnosed with a low-grade parotid cancer, which is a lump on my neck. Soon going to be having radiotherapy for that. The doctors have decided on proton beam therapy for me. Story 26. This question hits too close to home for me. I am currently fighting stage 4 rectal cancer that spread to my liver. I am a late 50s male that was too stupid and arrogant to go get checked or have a colonoscopy. When the doctor said I should, I thought I knew my body better than they did. That naive attitude will probably end up costing me my life. My family is what forced me to finally act. But unfortunately, too late, I have had digestive problems my entire life. Born with a faulty pylori valve, lousy eating habits, bad choices, lack of caring have finally caught up with me. Everything has a price, and the bill eventually comes due. I am paying now. 3 years ago, in addition to my normal struggles, I started seeing red blood on the toilet paper when I went to the bathroom. Not all the time, so I kind of ignored it. It eventually started happening more often. I did not tell anyone or go to a doctor. I just ignored it. My family kept pushing me to get it checked. I finally relented. In January 2019, I had a colonoscopy. When I woke up, the first words out of the doctor's mouth were, "I found something very concerning. This is not good for polyps." He removed 3, but the 4th was too large and too close to my anus. He took a bunch of biopsies. They all came back negative, few, or so I thought. It was recommended that I have it removed surgically, so in March, I had surgery and had it taken out. The surgeon wanted to remove the lymph nodes as well as the only way to be sure, but I said no, because that meant a colostomy. I was not ready for that. The biopsy from the surgery came back in late March 2019. Cancer, the dreaded C word. I was shocked but not surprised. I brought this on myself. In some way, I deserved it. Again, the surgeon recommended removing everything to be sure. I said no. The chances were not great, but not zero. So I opted for chemo and radiation to see if that would get it. 5 weeks of daily chemo and radiation in May 2019. That was tough, and it took a pretty big toll on me. But I made it through. The August scans looked promising. My CEA level, the colon cancer tumor marker, was dropping fast. My doctors were optimistic and telling me good things. My November scans looked just as good. I was told I was in remission, and they would monitor me for the next 2 years. Wow. Dodged a bullet. So I thought, right after Thanksgiving, I get a call from my oncologist. My CEA level has increased again, and they aren't sure why. I need to get checked again. I waited out through the holidays. In February 2020, I have a CT scan and a PET scan. I then have an EUA exam under anesthesia to check the original tumor. Not only is the original tumor back, but the cancer has spread to my liver, 3 lesions. I went from being in remission to stage 4 in less than 3 months. You talk about whiplash. My head was spinning. The hardest part was talking to my family about what was going on and what comes next. In April, I started on infused chemotherapy, Folfoxavastin, 4 hours of infusion, followed by 36 hours of a pump worn at home. I did this every 2 weeks for times covering an 8-week span. I was told to pause after that so I could deal with my liver. Time up the ante. I got into MD Anderson to see the experts. I have a huge team of doctors and specialists trying to help me survive, even though I was told by my local oncologist last year that radiation was a one-time thing, and I had my lifetime dosage. MDA doesn't see it that way. They have a more specialized approach. So in June, I went through a second round of radiation and chemo, twice a day, for 13 days at the end of June. And the following 2 weeks were just as bad trying to recover. I was honestly missing the infused chemo. And towards the end of the radiation, I paused the final treatment so I could have a procedure done on my liver to zap the 3 lesions. Then I finished the final radiation treatment the next day. My local oncologist called me ballsy for putting myself through that. In some ways, I felt like I deserved to suffer. I have slowly recovered from all of that, and I'm about to start back up on the infused chemo. I have 8 more rounds that have to be completed over the next 16 weeks. I've been hoping that by some miracle, this would cure my cancer. My doctors give me a less than 10% chance. All of this treatment is just slowing the spread of the cancer. As they have all been telling me for over a year, my only real chance is to remove the original tumor with surgery. I am almost assuredly facing a permanent colostomy at the end of all of this. If I had listened to my doctors last year and had that done, I might have saved some of this suffering and be cancer-free. Or perhaps not, I will never know. In the meantime, I will continue to fight it. I will deal with the terrible side effect from the treatments, the constant running to the bathroom, the shitting myself time and again, the pain and irritation, the embarrassment, the humiliation, the sadness of knowing what I have and am putting my family through. I am not afraid of dying. I am afraid of letting my family down. all because I was too stupid to listen to the people that know more than me. Trust me on this one, people. Pay attention, get checked early, get checked often. Don't be me, edit wow. I am overwhelmed by the responses, the kind thoughts and words, and the gilding. Thank you all. In reading your replies and my original post, I can see where it may sound like I am despondent and being too hard on myself. It reads worse than it is. I know cancer is an evil killer that is not prejudiced or biased. I did not help myself, but I know I didn't deserve it either. Another aspect I should have added to my post is that I am adopted and I have zero knowledge or information about my birth parents. So my medical history is a complete blank. It was this reason and the pushing from my family that drove me to get checked for my kids. Subsequent genetic testing has shown that I do in fact have 4 variants, making me more susceptible to certain cancers. Now my kids know that as well. The message is simple. Get checked if not for yourself, then for your kids and your family, present or future. Story 27 brother started forgetting words even while looking at object, could not say them, could write them, or even describe all parts of object, but not name like shoelaces, soon lost peripheral vision even before he could get to his primary doctor. All that within just 3 weeks, diagnosed with glioblastoma in February and died in June. Story 28 back in 2017. I had been having back pain for several months. I finally went to urgent care one day. When the pain was unbearable, they sent me immediately to the ER. I was admitted to the hospital and was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. It had spread to my liver and bones. My life completely changed that day. When faced with dying, I realized that I wanted to live. Before this, I had my suicide completely planned out. I feel like things happen for a reason, and things work out the way they're supposed to. I'm a new person today. I spend every day fighting for a life that I wanted to throw away. Story 29, dry patch of skin on my forehead, wouldn't stop scabbing and then bleeding, decided that was because I couldn't stop picking it. Ignored it for 5 years because I'm 1, that afraid of doctors, and 2, that incredibly stupid. Decided to leave it alone for 10 days and let it heal. It didn't. Finally got sick of worrying about it being basal cell carcinoma, and when it got diagnosed, basal cell carcinoma, it was dealt with pretty easily. But don't be like me. Story 30, my head and neck area became very swollen. At first I thought I was just getting fat, so I worked out a lot and ate better. This did not help. I also went to a local clinic and they thought it might be an allergic reaction and gave me steroids, which also didn't help. The thing that finally made me go to the emergency room and not leave until I had an answer is that I started to develop unexplained bruises on my chest. Turns out I had a huge tumor in my chest which had grown around my heart and was compressing the superior vena cava so blood couldn't flow back down from my head. Not great. The good news is that it turned out to be very treatable, and I've been cancer-free for 11 years now. Story 31, my mom found out she has cancer a week ago. At first she felt pain in her armpit, man. Naturally she did some research and found out that the people who have pain in the same spot have cancer. However, I didn't give it much thought as every cancer diagnosis is different. The next day, she went to the doctor. Turns out it's a tumor. The week after she tested the tumor to see if it's cancerous, and sadly it was. Tomorrow the doctor will tell her the plan for recovery. Please pray for her fast recovery. Edit, thank you everyone for the support. I lost my dad to cancer 2 years ago when I was 12. Thanks for all of your prayers. I really hope my mom can recover through this. Story 32, my brother, age 24, had a pain in his lower back, so went to the chiropractor. Didn't help, so he went to a real doctor. Cancerous tumor is blocking the spinal cord. You have less than a year to live. Anyway, my brother lived 3 years more, but the last one was in bed. Story 33, most of the patients I've seen had some weird gradual symptoms onset that they either ignored or just assumed was normal, or at least they're normal. Fatigue despite not changing much in their life. Weight loss that was attributed to him never really hungry anyways. Weird headaches, changing bowel habits, pencil-thin stool, blood in stool, etc. Moral of the story is don't ignore chronic symptoms. Please see your doc. Story 34, my father-in-law 65 or something has been feeling lethargic over the years. A month ago, he felt the left side of his body weaken and then it intermittently go numb, MRI, and found tumor on the right side of his brain, cancerous and aggressive. Removed some in a successful brain surgery. He has between 6 months and 3 years to live. Doesn't help that he has kidney and heart issues as well. Story 35, I was in a drum line in middle school, and we used to do this thing with the drumsticks to sting one another. This kid got me real good on my shoulder blade, and it caused an irritated growth. Doctor told us that it wouldn't go away on its own and would have to be removed. While in surgery to have it biopsy, my mom pointed out another bump on my back and asked the surgeon if it was the same thing. He replied no, and that it was fine. My mom insisted, asking him to remove it just in case, so we wouldn't have to come back, and he did. The second biopsy got infected, and I had to go on antibiotics, unknown at the time. The antibiotic prescribed to me I was allergic to, which did not have a good result. Got a call back for a results appointment that just happened to be on my 14th birthday. The surgeon never looked at me or said happy birthday. He just read the results and said sorry before leaving. It was scale 4 malignant melanoma. Story 36. I was 4. We were visiting my grandmother at work Target. I still distinctly remember playing with the little dots on a Sprite bottle. I had a potty, so my mom took me to the bathroom. I peed and stood up while she was helping fasten my pants. I looked at the toilet. It was full of blood. We rushed to the hospital. Turns out I had Wilms tumor. A tumor the size of a large grapefruit had ruptured my right kidney, and I was internally hemorrhaging. I was rushed to surgery.